Hi, welcome back to Grief Inspired. My name's Catherine McNulty, and here we are in October of 2019. I want to show you a symbol. Have you seen this symbol? It's pink and blue, so you may know that it has something to do with babies. And because we're in the month of October, you may not know that October, the entire month, is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance. And specifically, October 15th is the day that we all sort of acknowledge, continue to grieve, but also remember our lost pregnancies and our infant losses. I happen to have had both. So I had what's called a miscarriage. And then I also had an infant loss. So I had a son that was born at 27 weeks, and he passed away. So the day has a lot of special meaning to me. But what it's really designed to do is to bring us all together. So if you know of anyone who's had a miscarriage, or you yourself have had a miscarriage, take a little extra time today and tomorrow and the rest of the month, honestly, just to give it some thought. Acknowledge it. Here's the reality. The reality is that 1 in 4 women will have a miscarriage. And in another video, we're going to talk through how culturally we're different in the US and how our approach to grief is different. But I think the thing to know is that 1 in 4 women have experienced a miscarriage. And a lot of people sort of downplay the miscarriage and say, well, you're young, you could have another one. Or it wasn't really a baby anyways. I hate that one. Or it's okay, it's better because there probably would have been something wrong with the baby if the baby had survived. And miscarriage is part of, a lot of times, fertility. And a lot of women, like I said, 25% of women have experienced a miscarriage. So it is pervasive. And I don't think that it should be downplayed as much as it is. And the reason why it creates grief and why miscarriage can be so painful is because the moment you realize that you're pregnant, whether you wanted to be pregnant or not, right? Sometimes it's a surprise, or, in my case, I was actively trying, right? And I knew down to like the minute when to test to see whether or not I was pregnant, because of all the fertility treatments and things that I was doing. But no matter whether you know you're pregnant or not, the moment that you find out is an interesting time, because you start to think of the entire future that you could have with this baby. And you can think, is it going to be a boy or a girl? And what's going to happen? And we start to play out in our mind all of the things and how interesting it would be and how fun it would be, and also how challenging it would be, to have a baby of our own. And so again, 1 in 4. So you're likely going to run across someone today who's had a miscarriage. And so if it's been you, don't be shy about telling people, hey, it's Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and October 15th, which is tomorrow, is specific to the actual day. And so I want to encourage you to post something on your Facebook. You can, go to my Facebook, which is also Grief Inspired. I will have things there that you can repost if you want to do that, or you can just Google Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness, and there's all kinds of symbols and things that you can post and share a little bit about your story. And by you sharing your story, it's going to really give other people permission to do the same thing, and I think that's good. Like I said, in our next video, I'm going to talk about how we grieve differently in our culture than in other cultures, and how there's much more emphasis put on grief in other cultures. And I'm not sure why that is, but it is the way our culture is. And I'm doing my best to change that. So, if you are grieving, I've had a couple people who have reached out to me recently and said, I just don't know how to do this. I don't know how to cope with the loss. And my question is, why are you grieving alone? And it's hard enough. Most of us don't know anything about grief until it comes upon us. And we're sort of left to try to figure it out, and it's kind of hush-hush in our culture, and so we don't really talk about it, and people will come to the funeral and then they'll disappear, and wait a couple months and hope that you're better. Or people at work, when you're at work, will, bosses will say, snap out of it. What's wrong with you? Our work is really important. And so I want to emphasize that having a grief coach is a good thing. Grieving in and of itself is a challenging and difficult process. And the closer to that person that you are, the more difficult your grief is going to be. And I always say that grief is equal to the amount of love that you have in your heart. So if you have a very strong love, so for example, my connection with my son, right, that was a deep, deep grief. A connection with your parents is a deep, deep grief. A connection with a best friend, same thing. A spouse, a sibling. These are all the types of experiences that invoke a deep grief response. And so I want to encourage you to get support, that you shouldn't have to grieve alone, and that there is absolutely no problem with getting support and saying, okay, how do I do this? Right? I don't know about grief. I don't know what to expect. I don't know how to get through the process. I don't know how to move through it more quickly. Like, one of the things that I do is I teach people how to move through grief more quickly. And here's the other thing. We're not taught how to grieve, right? It's one of the main things that I talk about is we don't learn how to grieve, and we don't start grieving or even think about grief in our life until it's upon us. And then we're so devastated that it's overwhelming. And so again, I want to reiterate that asking for support really is a sign of strength. It doesn't mean that you're not strong enough to go it on your own. Yes, you could go it on your own. I mean, I grieved by myself, but it's hard, and it's harder than it needs to be. So I want to encourage you to get support, whether it's coaching with me or coaching with someone else or going to see a therapist. I think it's important. And one of the things that I do that's different, and I think going to therapists is wonderful, and I continue to see a therapist of my own because I love the experience, and I love being able to dive into, what's going on with me and talk about, what I can do better and how I can learn more and learn about what's going on with my grief, even this far out, because things still come up. And I want to continue to go to therapy so that I can do more to help all of you. But in terms of getting support, we're all going to grieve. Grief is universal. It's going to happen to all of us. If you have a grief coach, what's different about a grief coach and a grief therapist is that as a coach, I walk with you through the process. And I'm a coach because I've already been through the process with you. And so I'll have unique insights about my own grief process that I can use, that I can share with you, that we can talk about together and help you get through some of the most challenging days. being silent about your grief or avoiding it, which is what a lot of people do, not particularly helpful. Your grief is going to come back. It absolutely does. So you might as well deal with it now. Getting educated about grief, right? What do you need to know? Well, I can give you that. I can tell you, bulleted down, that's what I'm good at, is breaking down concepts and saying, okay, here's what you need to know. Here's the nuts and bolts, right? Let's work through this and how it specifically affects you. And then how is it going to change your life, right? If you lost a spouse, your life is now dramatically different. And what does that mean for your life? So being able to understand how your life is going to change and what that means for you, it's a big deal. So I don't want to downplay it and have you think that you don't need the support, because why wouldn't you? And I think the thing that sometimes we forget, and I didn't know this particularly when I was going through the grief process, is that as hard as it is and as challenging as it can be to get through and to survive the day in and day out, to experience the grief, the reality is you are going to learn from the experience. You're going to learn more about yourself. You're going to learn more about your life. You're going to learn more about what's important to you and what you value. So there's a lot of changes that are going to happen as a result of the grief process, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing. In my case, my book that I wrote is called The Gifts of Grief. I have it here, if you'd like to see it. The Gifts of Grief. This particular book, this is about how the lessons that I learned from my experience, as tragic as it was, and losing my little boy, here he is, Jackson Robert, as difficult and challenging as that was, he taught me things, and the process taught me things, and I see them now as gifts, and that's why I call it The Gifts of Grief. There's an opportunity to learn, and there's an opportunity to grow, and you should not have to do this on your own. So when people ask me, how do I cope with a loss? The first thing I say is, don't do it alone. Make sure that you're with other people who understand your loss, who can support you in an effective way. And that's why I recommend a coach, because that's what we do. And I enjoy doing it, and I love being able to teach what I've learned, give you the tools, and say, hey, don't make this mistake, because this is what I did wrong. Just to give you an example, I did not know, right? So everybody tells you about the 5 stages of grief. I did not know that those 5 stages of grief are actually not linear. Meaning, you don't start out with, anger and depression and bargaining and move to acceptance, right? That doesn't happen. It's very, very fluid. And so I started feeling better. And this was a couple months into my loss. I started feeling better. And then something happened, and all of a sudden, I sank into a deep depression. And I was devastated because I thought I was doing better. And so then I beat myself up for saying, I should be doing better by now. And that's why people say there is no timeline to grief. So I could talk about grief for forever. I really could. And I enjoy talking about it. And because I want to help, because you shouldn't have to do it alone. You deserve to get support, and I'm going to keep saying that, and I'm going to say it over and over again until you guys start to realize that you do deserve support, and that you shouldn't do it on your own. And it's just, that is my message. Like I said, in the next video, I am going to talk about how different cultures deal with grief. And here in the US, we're not very good at it. And I want to change that. So I want to help all of you. And I want you to know that it's okay to grieve. It's part of life. And you wouldn't know the level of love that you know for the people that you have. You don't fully understand that love until you've started to grieve some of them. And it gives you major, major insights. Losing my son changed my entire life. Everything about my life. And it's going to change you too. So that's my message. Don't grieve alone. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I am happy to help any of you. I always do free consultations. If you want to talk to me and get to know what we would do together, please email me or message me here. Just reach out to me. And you can find my website at griefinspired.com. You can see my blogs there. Just start the conversation. Have a great day today. Again, it's October. It's Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. Don't forget to reach out to somebody that you know who has experienced a miscarriage and just say, hey, I'm thinking about you today. That's all we need to do, is we just need to be in it together. So have a great day today, and I can't wait to talk to you in the next video. Again, we're going to be talking about how different cultures interact with grief, and I think it's going to be an interesting one. So we will see you then. My name's Catherine McNulty, and I want you to be grief inspired too. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.